The morning started like any other for Claire Gray. She woke up before sunrise, made breakfast for her daughter, and carefully braided Lily's hair, while the little girl talked excitedly about a drawing she wanted to finish at school. Claire listened with a soft smile, nodding at every detail, feeling grateful for these small moments that made everything worth it. At 36 years old, she had learned to appreciate the simple things. Life had not been easy, but she had built something stable, something real. And that morning, as she tucked a little note into Lily's lunchbox like she always did, she had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. Claire worked as an administrative coordinator at a private financial firm downtown. The job was demanding, the hours were long, and the expectations were high, but she never complained. After years of struggling to make ends meet, working multiple jobs and barely sleeping, this position had given her something she had almost forgotten existed: stability. She could finally afford to send Lily to a good school. She could finally stop counting every dollar. And she had earned it all through her own hard work. Not luck, not charity. That meant everything to her. Her boss, Richard Price, was a man of few words. At 58 years old, he had the kind of presence that made people straighten their posture when he entered a room. He rarely smiled, rarely engaged in small talk, and never showed any emotion whatsoever. Some employees feared him. Others simply avoided him. Claire had always respected him from a distance, admiring his professionalism even if she found him intimidating. In the 2 years she had worked there, he had never called her into his office without a scheduled reason. He had never looked at her with anything other than cold neutrality. That was simply who he was, a man carved from stone. But that morning, everything changed. Claire had just arrived at the office when she noticed something strange. The usual buzz of conversations and phone calls was absent. People spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously at each other. 2 men in dark suits stood near the executive elevators, watching everyone who passed with sharp, unblinking eyes. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, but she told herself it was nothing. Maybe an important client was visiting. Maybe there was an audit. She sat at her desk and tried to focus on her work. At exactly 9:14 in the morning, her phone rang. It was Mr. Price's assistant. The woman's voice was tense, almost breathless. "Claire, Mr. Price wants to see you immediately." Before Claire could ask why, the line went dead. Her stomach tightened as she stood up and walked down the long hallway toward his office. She told herself it was probably about the quarterly reports. Maybe he had a question about a file she had submitted. There was no reason to be nervous. She had done nothing wrong. When she stepped inside his office, she found him standing by the window with his back to her. His shoulders were stiff, his hands clasped tightly behind him. He did not greet her. He did not turn around. The silence stretched painfully until Claire finally spoke. "You wanted to see me, sir?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned to face her, and what Claire saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. Fear. Pure, undeniable fear. She had never seen him show any emotion, and now his face was pale, his jaw tight, his gaze filled with something that looked almost like desperation. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Her name was written on it in bold black ink. He slid it across the desk toward her, and when he spoke, his voice was low and urgent. "Take this. Do not open it here. Go home. Pack a bag. Take your daughter. You have 24 hours. Claire stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. She almost laughed, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. But the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes refused to look away from hers, told her this was anything but a joke. She opened her mouth to ask what was happening, but he cut her off. "Claire, listen to me carefully. In 2 years, I have never joked with you. Never. But what I am telling you now is more serious than anything I have ever said in this company. Your life depends on what you do in the next few hours. Do exactly as I say. Do not tell anyone." Do not call anyone. Just go. Claire felt the room spin around her. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the envelope. She wanted to demand an explanation, to understand why the man who barely acknowledged her existence was suddenly trying to save her life. But something in his expression stopped her. He looked like a man who had already said more than he should, a man who was terrified of what would happen next. She left his office in a daze, clutching the envelope against her chest. The hallway seemed longer than before, the fluorescent lights too bright, the silence too loud. She grabbed her purse from her desk and walked out of the building without looking back. The cold air hit her face as she stepped outside, but it did nothing to clear the fog in her mind. What had just happened? What was inside this envelope? And why did Richard Price, a man who never showed emotion, look like he had just signed his own death sentence? Claire hurried through the crowded streets, her heart pounding with every step. She kept glancing over her shoulder, suddenly aware of every stranger who passed too close, every car that slowed down near her. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely unlock the door. She stepped inside, locked it behind her, and stood in the middle of the living room staring at the envelope. For a long moment, she could not move. Part of her wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Mr. Price was going through some kind of breakdown. Maybe this was an elaborate prank. But deep down, she knew that made no sense. The fear in his eyes had been real. The urgency in his voice had been real. And whatever was inside this envelope was about to change everything. She took a deep breath and slid her finger beneath the seal. Inside, she found 3 things: a plane ticket departing at 7:45 that evening, a prepaid phone with a single number saved under the name Call Only This, and a photograph that made her legs give out beneath her. It was a picture of Lily standing outside her school, smiling innocently at something in the distance. The timestamp showed it had been taken that very morning. Claire's vision blurred with tears as the truth crashed over her. Someone had been watching her daughter. Someone had been close enough to take this picture without anyone noticing. And whoever they were, they knew exactly where Lily went to school, exactly what time she arrived, exactly how to find her. There was also a handwritten note tucked behind the photograph. The ink was slightly smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry. The words were simple but devastating. They know what you saw. Do exactly as instructed. If you are still here after midnight, they will come for you and your daughter. Trust no one. You are being watched. Claire read the note 3 times, trying to make sense of it. What had she seen? She could not think of anything unusual. She had been processing financial documents, just numbers and spreadsheets and routine transfers. Nothing that seemed dangerous, nothing that should put her life at risk. But someone believed otherwise, and they were willing to hurt her daughter to keep her silent. Claire wiped her tears and forced herself to stand. She did not have time to fall apart. She did not have time to understand. All she knew was that Lily was at school, alone, unprotected, and Claire needed to get to her before anyone else did. She grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her mind racing with a single thought. Whatever was happening, whatever she had unknowingly stumbled into, she would do anything to protect her daughter, even if it meant leaving everything behind, even if it meant trusting a man she barely knew, even if it meant running into the unknown with nothing but a plane ticket and a prayer. Claire drove faster than she ever had before. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, and her eyes kept darting to the rear-view mirror, searching for any sign that someone was following her. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every car that pulled up beside her made her heart skip a beat. By the time she reached Lily's school, she was barely breathing. She parked crookedly and rushed inside, trying to keep her composure as she signed Lily out at the front desk. The secretary asked if everything was all right, and Claire forced a smile, saying they had a family appointment she had almost forgotten. The lie came out smoother than she expected. When Lily appeared in the hallway, Her little face lit up with surprise and joy. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Claire knelt down and pulled her daughter into a tight hug, holding her longer than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "We are going on a little adventure, sweetheart. A surprise trip. Just you and me." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? Where are we going?" Claire smiled, though her heart was breaking. "You will see. But first, we need to go home and pack a few things. Can you help me?" The drive back to the apartment felt longer than before. Claire kept checking the mirrors, scanning every vehicle behind her. And then she saw it. A black SUV, 3 cars back, matching every turn she made. Her throat tightened. She changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. She took an unexpected exit. The SUV followed. There was no denying it now. They were being watched. They were being followed. And whoever was behind this was not even trying to hide anymore. Claire's mind raced as she tried to stay calm for Lily's sake. She took a longer route, circling through side streets and quiet neighborhoods until she was certain she had lost them. By the time they reached the apartment, her hands were shaking again. She told Lily to go to her room and pack her favorite clothes and her stuffed animals. The little girl ran off happily, treating this like a game, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Claire moved quickly through the apartment, grabbing essentials, clothes, documents, cash she had been saving for emergencies. She stuffed everything into a single suitcase, her eyes constantly moving to the window, expecting to see shadowy figures outside at any moment. The prepaid phone sat on the kitchen counter, almost pulsing with urgency. She turned it on and saw a message flash across the screen. "Do not call until you reach the airport." She wanted to scream. She wanted answers. But there was no time. Her regular phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A calm female voice spoke without introduction. "They are outside your building right now. Do not open the curtains. Do not use the main exit. Leave through the back entrance. Take only 1 bag each. If you want your daughter to be safe, follow these instructions exactly." The line went dead before Claire could say a word. She stood frozen, fear slamming into her so hard she had to grip the counter to keep from falling. This was not paranoia. This was not a mistake. They were outside, right now, watching, waiting. Claire forced herself to breathe. She walked to Lily's room and found her daughter carefully placing her favorite stuffed rabbit into a small backpack. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "we are going to play a game. We are going to sneak out the back door like secret agents. Can you be really quiet for me?" Lily giggled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Like spies?" "Exactly like spies." Claire took her hand and led her to the back stairwell. Every creak of the steps made Claire's heart leap. The building's back exit opened into a narrow alley that led to a side street where she had parked her car earlier that week. She had never been more grateful for that old habit of keeping a backup parking spot. They moved quickly, staying close to the walls, avoiding the dim pools of light from the street lamps. As Claire buckled Lily into the back seat, she heard something that made her freeze. A man's voice, faint but clear, coming from somewhere above them. A radio transmission. "Target has moved. They have the child." Her blood turned to ice. They knew. They were tracking her. And they were close. Claire got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out as calmly as she could manage. She did not speed. She did not panic. She drove like a woman taking her daughter to a normal evening activity, even as her insides screamed with terror. The airport was 40 minutes away. 40 minutes to freedom. 40 minutes to survival. The drive felt like an eternity. Claire kept her eyes on the road and her hands steady on the wheel, but her mind was spinning. What had she seen? The question kept echoing in her head. She thought back to the past few days, searching for anything unusual. And then it hit her. 3 days ago, she had been processing a batch of financial transfers. Routine work, nothing special. But one transfer had caught her attention. A dormant account that had shown no activity for years had suddenly received $20 million from an overseas source. The amount was staggering, and the account had no clear owner listed, just a series of numbers and a reference code. Claire had flagged it for review. She had asked her supervisor about it, a woman named Patricia, who always seemed nervous around the executives. Patricia had looked at the screen, gone pale, and told Claire to approve it without asking questions. "Just process it," she had said. "Do not mention this to anyone." Claire had done as she was told, confused, but not wanting to cause trouble. She had assumed it was some kind of internal matter she was not supposed to understand. But now, sitting in this car with her daughter sleeping in the back seat, Claire realized the truth. That transfer was not routine. That account was not innocent. And by flagging it, by asking questions, she had unknowingly stepped into something far bigger than she could have imagined. Someone had seen the log. Someone knew she had accessed that file. And now they wanted to make sure she never spoke about it. The airport appeared on the horizon like a beacon of hope. Claire parked in the short-term lot and carried Lily, who had fallen asleep during the drive, through the terminal. She checked in using the ticket from the envelope, her hands trembling as she handed over their documents. The woman at the counter smiled politely and wished her a pleasant flight. Claire almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Pleasant, as if anything about this night was pleasant. They boarded the plane just minutes before departure. Claire settled Lily into the window seat and buckled her in gently, careful not to wake her. As the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi down the runway, Claire finally allowed herself to exhale. They were leaving. They were escaping. Whatever waited for them at the other end, at least they were no longer trapped. The plane lifted off, and Claire watched the city shrink beneath the clouds. Somewhere down there, men in dark suits were searching for her. Somewhere down there, Richard Price was probably facing consequences for warning her. She thought about him, about the fear in his eyes, about the way his voice had trembled when he told her to run. Why had he done it? Why had he risked everything to save a woman he barely acknowledged? She did not know, but she was grateful, more grateful than she could ever express. Lily stirred beside her, her small hand reaching out in her sleep until it found Claire's arm. Claire looked at her daughter's peaceful face, so innocent, so unaware of the danger they had just escaped. In that moment, she made a silent promise. No matter what happened next, no matter what she had to face, she would protect this child with everything she had. She would not let anyone hurt her. Not now, not ever. The flight was scheduled to land in a small mountain town far from the city. Claire did not know what awaited them there. She did not know who would meet them or what she would have to do. All she knew was that she had left her entire life behind in a matter of hours. Her apartment, her job, her sense of safety, everything she had worked so hard to build was gone, and in its place was nothing but uncertainty and fear. But there was also something else, something she had not felt in a long time: determination. Whoever these people were, whatever they wanted, Claire was not going to let them win. She had spent her whole life fighting for herself and her daughter. She had faced hardship and loneliness and exhaustion, and she had survived it all. This was just another battle, and she was not going to lose. The plane flew on through the darkening sky, carrying a mother and her child toward an unknown future. Behind them, the city lights faded into nothing. Ahead of them, the mountains waited in silence. And somewhere in the shadows, powerful men were already planning their next move, determined to silence Claire Gray before she could uncover the truth. The plane touched down in a small airport surrounded by towering mountains capped with snow. The air was crisp and cold when Claire stepped outside, carrying Lily in her arms. The little girl had woken during the descent and was now looking around with wide, curious eyes. "It is so pretty here, Mom. Are we on vacation?" Claire smiled softly and kissed her forehead. "Something like that, sweetheart. Just a little adventure for the two of us." Inside the terminal, Claire pulled out the prepaid phone and dialed the only number saved in it. The phone rang once before a man's voice answered. "Leave the airport now. A black pickup truck will be waiting at the curb. Get in. Do not speak until I tell you it is safe." The line went dead before she could respond. Claire's heart pounded as she walked toward the exit, holding Lily's hand tightly. Part of her wanted to turn around and run in the opposite direction. She was about to get into a stranger's vehicle in an unfamiliar place with her daughter. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. But then she thought about the photograph of Lily outside her school. She thought about the men outside her building. She thought about Richard Price's trembling hands and terrified eyes. If he trusted this person enough to send her here, she had to trust him too. The black pickup truck was exactly where the voice had said it would be. Behind the wheel sat a rugged man who appeared to be in his late 40s. He had sharp eyes, a weathered face, and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of facing difficult situations. He rolled down the window and looked directly at her. "Claire Gray?" She nodded, unable to find her voice. "Get in." Claire helped Lily into the back seat and climbed into the passenger side. The moment the doors closed, the truck pulled away from the curb and headed toward the mountains. They drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Lily had fallen asleep again, exhausted from the long day, her head resting against her stuffed rabbit. Claire stared out the window at the pine trees rushing past, her mind filled with questions she was afraid to ask. Finally, the man spoke. "My name is Daniel Cross. I was a federal agent for 15 years. Richard Price was my partner in a task force that investigated financial crimes connected to organized networks." Claire turned to look at him, her breath catching in her throat. "Partner? I thought he was just a businessman." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Richard was never just a businessman. 20 years ago, we uncovered a network that was using private financial firms to move money for some of the most dangerous people in the world. Politicians, crime syndicates, foreign operatives, the kind of people who do not leave witnesses." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "We got too close. They found out, and they made Richard pay the price." He paused, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Richard had a daughter. Her name was Sophie. She was 19 years old, bright, kind, full of life. One night, she was driving home from college when her car was forced off the road. They called it an accident. But Richard knew the truth. They killed her to send him a message, to make him stop digging. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." Daniel nodded grimly. After that, Richard changed. He shut down. He stopped the investigation, left the task force, and buried himself in the corporate world. He thought if he stayed quiet, if he pretended he did not know anything, they would leave him alone. And for 20 years, they did. The truck turned off the main road and began climbing a narrow path into the mountains. Claire's mind was reeling. The man she had worked for, the cold and distant boss who never showed emotion, had lost his daughter to the same people who were now hunting her. Suddenly, his fear made sense. His urgency made sense. He was not just trying to save her. He was trying to prevent history from repeating itself. "But I do not understand," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do I have to do with any of this? I just process paperwork. I do not know anything about criminal networks or money laundering." Daniel glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. 3 days ago, you flagged a transfer. $20 million moving into a dormant account. Do you remember?" Claire nodded slowly. "I asked my supervisor about it. She told me to approve it and forget it. That account," Daniel continued, "has been inactive for almost 15 years. It was created by the network as a backup channel, a way to move large sums of money without detection. When you flagged that transfer, you triggered an alert in their system. They saw your name, they saw your employee number, and they realized that someone had finally stumbled onto something they thought was buried forever." Claire felt sick, but I did not even know what I was looking at. I just thought it was an error. It does not matter what you thought, Daniel said firmly. What matters is what they think. And right now, they think you have access to information that could expose their entire operation. That makes you a threat, and they do not let threats survive. The truck pulled up to a secluded cabin hidden among the trees. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and the surrounding forest was so dense it felt like they had entered another world entirely. Daniel turned off the engine and looked at Claire with serious eyes. This is a safe house. No one knows about this place except Richard and me. You and your daughter will stay here until we figure out our next move. Claire unbuckled her seatbelt, but did not move. She had so many questions, so many fears, but one thought kept rising above all the others. Why did Richard warn me? He barely knew I existed. He could have stayed silent and let them take me. Why did he risk everything to save me? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly, almost gently. Because you reminded him of Sophie. Claire blinked, confused. What do you mean? Daniel sighed. When Richard hired you 2 years ago, he told me something strange. He said there was a woman in his office who worked with the same dedication his daughter had, the same integrity, the same quiet strength. He never spoke to you much because it was too painful. Every time he looked at you, he saw the daughter he lost. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. She thought about all the times she had felt invisible in that office, all the times she had wondered if her boss even knew her name. And now she understood. He had noticed her. He had seen her. And when her life was in danger, he had done the one thing he could not do for his own daughter. He had saved her. Daniel opened his door. Come inside. There is a lot more you need to know, and we do not have much time. Claire gently lifted Lily from the back seat, cradling her sleeping daughter against her shoulder. As she walked toward the cabin, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had left her home, her job, her entire life. She was in the middle of nowhere with a man she had just met, hiding from people who wanted her dead. And yet, for the first time since this nightmare began, she did not feel completely alone. Inside the cabin, maps covered the walls, marked with red circles and handwritten notes. A large wooden table was covered with files, photographs, and documents that looked decades old. Daniel gestured for her to sit down while he prepared some coffee. Claire laid Lily on a small couch in the corner and covered her with a blanket before returning to the table. Daniel placed a steaming cup in front of her and sat across from her. Richard has been quietly gathering evidence for years. He never stopped investigating. He just went underground. But he could never go public because he did not have enough proof. The network is too powerful, too well connected. Every time he got close, they found a way to shut him down. Claire wrapped her hands around the warm cup. So what changed? Daniel leaned forward. You did. That transfer you flagged was the missing piece. It connects directly to accounts that Richard has been tracking for 2 decades. But here is the problem. When you accessed that file, a copy was automatically saved to your work terminal, a backup that even the network does not know about. Claire's eyes widened. You mean I have evidence on my computer? Not anymore, Daniel said. Richard had someone extract it before you left the building. He looked at her intensely. The file is encrypted, and the only person who can unlock it is you. Claire stared at Daniel, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. What do you mean I am the only one who can unlock it? Daniel stood and walked to a metal cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a laptop and a small external drive, placing both on the table in front of her. When you flagged that transfer, the system created an encrypted backup. Richard's contact managed to extract it before the network could delete it. But the encryption is tied to your employee credentials, your identification number, your password, and a security code that was sent to your work email that same day. Claire remembered the email. She had thought it was a routine system notification and had barely glanced at it. I think I remember the code, she said slowly. I wrote it down in my notebook. I always keep notes of things like that." Daniel's eyes lit up with something like hope. "Do you have the notebook with you?" Claire hesitated, then reached into her bag. She had grabbed it without thinking. A force of habit. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. A 6-digit code scrawled in the margin next to a reminder about a meeting that never mattered. Daniel exhaled with relief. That code, combined with your credentials, is the key to everything. Without it, this file is useless. With it, we can expose the entire network, every transaction, every name, every connection they have tried to bury for the past 20 years. Claire looked at the laptop, then at her daughter sleeping peacefully on the couch. "If I do this, what happens to us?" Daniel sat down across from her, his expression serious but kind. "Richard has arranged for you to enter witness protection. New identities, new location, a fresh start somewhere far from here. Once the information is released, the network will collapse. There will be arrests, investigations, trials. They will be too busy trying to save themselves to come after you." "And if it does not work?" Claire asked quietly. "If they find us before the information gets out?" Daniel did not look away. "That is why we have to move fast. Richard bought us time by creating a distraction, but it will not last forever. They are already looking for you. And when they realize you are not in the city anymore, they will start searching everywhere else." Claire felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She thought about her life back home. The apartment she had worked so hard to afford. The job that had finally given her stability. The small routines that had made her feel safe. All of it was gone now. And in its place was this. A cabin in the mountains. A laptop full of secrets. And the fate of countless people resting on her shoulders. She thought about Lily. About the photographs someone had taken of her innocent daughter standing outside her school. About the men who had been willing to hurt a child just to keep their secrets buried. And in that moment, something shifted inside Claire. She was not just running anymore. She was not just trying to survive. She was angry. Angry at the people who had stolen her peace. Angry at the system that allowed them to operate in the shadows. Angry at herself for ever thinking she could stay invisible in a world where monsters like them existed. "I will do it," she said firmly. "Tell me what I need to do." Daniel nodded and opened the laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light of the cabin as he inserted the external drive. A prompt appeared, asking for authentication. Claire leaned forward and carefully typed her employee identification number, then her password, then the 6-digit code from her notebook. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, and files began to appear. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Transaction records, account statements, email exchanges, photographs, and documents spanning 2 decades of criminal activity. Claire scrolled through the files in disbelief. There were names she recognized. Politicians who appeared on television advocating for economic reform. Business leaders who donated to charities and shook hands with community organizers. People who presented themselves as pillars of society while secretly funding operations that destroyed lives. The scale of it was staggering. Daniel pointed to a folder labeled with a date from 15 years ago. "This is the account that received the transfer you flagged. It was dormant for years because they thought it was compromised after Sophie's death. But recently, they started using it again. They thought enough time had passed. They thought no one was watching anymore." He looked at Claire. They were wrong. Claire continued scrolling until she found something that made her stop. A photograph of a young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. She looked familiar somehow, though Claire could not place why. "Who is this?" she asked. Daniel's expression softened. "That is Sophie, Richard's daughter." Claire stared at the photograph, her heart aching. She saw the resemblance now. The same determined look in her eyes. The same gentle curve of her smile. For a moment, Claire understood why Richard had noticed her. Why he had kept his distance. Why he had ultimately risked everything to save her. A sudden noise outside made them both freeze. Daniel moved quickly to the window, peering through the curtains into the darkness. Headlights were approaching through the trees. "They found us," he said quietly. "We need to move now." Claire's heart raced as she scooped Lily into her arms. The little girl stirred and whimpered, but did not wake. Daniel grabbed the laptop and the drive, shoving them into a backpack along with several files from the table. "There is a back exit that leads to an old trail. My truck is hidden about a quarter-mile down. Stay close to me and do not make a sound." They slipped out the back door just as the front of the cabin exploded with light. Flashlights swept across the windows, and voices shouted commands in the distance. Claire held Lily tightly against her chest, following Daniel through the dense forest. Branches scratched her arms and face, but she did not slow down. She could hear footsteps behind them, getting closer. Daniel suddenly stopped and pulled her behind a large boulder. He pressed a finger to his lips and pointed ahead. Through the trees, Claire could see the outline of his truck, barely visible in the moonlight. "We need to run," he whispered. "When I say go, you do not stop until you reach that truck. Do you understand?" Claire nodded, her entire body trembling. "Go!" She ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, clutching Lily so tightly the little girl finally woke and began to cry. "It is okay, baby," Claire gasped between breaths. "Mommy has you. We are almost there." She could hear Daniel behind her, his footsteps heavy on the forest floor. She could hear the shouts of their pursuers growing fainter as they fell behind. They reached the truck and threw themselves inside. Daniel started the engine and floored the accelerator, sending gravel spraying behind them as they tore down the narrow path. Claire looked back through the rear window and saw flashlights emerging from the tree line, too late to catch them. Lily was crying softly, her face buried in Claire's shoulder. "Mommy, I am scared." Claire stroked her hair, her own tears falling freely now. "I know, sweetheart. I know. But I promise you, everything is going to be okay. I will never let anyone hurt you." Daniel drove through the night, taking back roads and unmarked paths that seemed to lead nowhere. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, he pulled the truck into a small clearing beside an abandoned barn. He turned to Claire, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "We are safe for now, but we need to upload those files before they have a chance to regroup." Claire looked at the backpack containing the laptop and the evidence that could bring down an empire. She thought about Richard Price, alone somewhere, facing the consequences of his decision to save her. She thought about Sophie, a young woman who had died simply because her father had tried to do the right thing. And she thought about Lily, asleep again in her arms, innocent and trusting, and completely dependent on her mother to keep her safe. She reached for the backpack and pulled out the laptop. "Then let us finish this." The abandoned barn smelled of old hay and forgotten time, but to Claire, it felt like a sanctuary. Morning light filtered through cracks in the wooden walls, casting golden stripes across the dusty floor. Lily was still asleep in the back seat of the truck, wrapped in a blanket Daniel had found in the back. Claire sat on an overturned crate, the laptop open in front of her, the weight of everything pressing against her chest. Daniel had connected the laptop to a satellite device that would allow them to upload the files directly to federal servers, news agencies, and international organizations. Once the information was out, there would be no stopping it, no deleting it, no burying it. The truth would spread across the world like wildfire, and the people who had hidden in the shadows for so long would finally be exposed. Claire stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the key that would begin the upload. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The envelope in Richard's trembling hands, the photograph of Lily outside her school, the terror of fleeing her home with nothing but a suitcase and a prayer. She thought about Sophie, a young woman she had never met but somehow felt connected to, a daughter who had died because her father had tried to do the right thing. And she thought about Richard Price, the man who had barely spoken to her in 2 years, The man whose cold exterior had hidden a heart shattered by loss. He had seen something in her that she had never seen in herself. He had believed she was worth saving, worth protecting, worth trusting with the most important decision of his life. She could not let him down. Claire pressed the key. The screen came alive with progress bars and status updates. Files began uploading to destinations around the world, federal agencies, news networks, international courts. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle that Richard had spent 20 years assembling were finally being released. Claire watched as the numbers climbed higher and higher, each percentage point representing another step toward justice. Daniel stood by the window, watching the road for any sign of danger. His shoulders were tense, his hand resting near his weapon. But as the upload reached 50%, then 70%, then 90%, some of the tension seemed to leave his body. They had done it. They had actually done it. Upload complete. The words appeared on the screen in simple white letters, but to Claire, they felt like a declaration of freedom. She leaned back and closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. It was over. The secret was out. The people who had terrorized her, who had threatened her daughter, who had killed an innocent young woman 20 years ago, would finally face the consequences of their actions. Daniel's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a moment, then turned to Claire with an expression she could not quite read. "It is Richard," he said. "He wants to talk to you." Claire's heart skipped as she took the phone. "Richard?" There was a long pause before his voice came through, weaker than she remembered but unmistakably his. "You did it, Claire. I knew you would." She felt fresh tears welling in her eyes. "Are you okay? Where are you?" Richard let out a slow breath. "I am somewhere safe, for now. But that is not important. What matters is that the truth is finally out. Because of you." Claire shook her head, even though he could not see her. "Because of you. You are the one who warned me. You are the one who gathered all this evidence. I just pressed a button." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Claire, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." She waited, her heart pounding. 20 years ago, I lost my daughter, Sophie. She was 19, bright, kind, stubborn in the best way. She wanted to change the world, and I believed she would. When they took her from me, something inside me died with her. I shut everyone out. I stopped feeling. I thought if I never let anyone get close again, the pain would not be able to reach me. Claire listened in silence, tears falling freely now. "When I hired you 2 years ago," Richard continued, "I told myself it was because of your qualifications, your work ethic, your attention to detail. But the truth is, from the moment you walked into that office, you reminded me of her. The way you dedicated yourself to every task, no matter how small. The way you treated everyone with respect, even people who did not deserve it. Even the way you smiled when you thought no one was watching." His voice broke slightly. "I kept my distance because it was too painful. Every time I looked at you, I saw the daughter I could not save. But when I found out you were in danger, when I realized they were going to do to you what they did to Sophie, I knew I could not stay silent. Not again. I could not let them take another daughter from this world." Claire was sobbing now, unable to speak. She thought about all the times she had felt invisible in that office, all the times she had wondered if anyone noticed her hard work, her dedication, her quiet strength. And all along, Richard had seen her. He had seen everything. "I am so sorry," she finally managed to say. "I am so sorry about Sophie." Richard's voice steadied. "Do not be sorry. Be proud. You did what I never could. You finished what Sophie and I started. And because of you, her death finally means something." The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Richard spoke again. "Take care of your daughter, Claire. Hold her close. Tell her you love her every single day. Because time is the one thing we can never get back." "I will," Claire whispered. "I promise." The call ended, and Claire sat there in the dusty barn, clutching the phone against her chest. She felt exhausted and broken, and somehow impossibly whole. She had lost everything she had built, her home, her job, her sense of safety, but she had gained something far more valuable. The knowledge that she had made a difference, that her life had mattered, that a man who had lost everything had found enough hope in her to keep fighting. Daniel drove them to a small federal facility where agents were waiting to take their statements and begin the process of witness protection. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews, paperwork, and sleepless nights. But through it all, Claire held on to the promise she had made. She held Lily close. She told her she loved her every single day, and she never forgot the man who had saved them both. Months passed. The evidence Claire had helped release sent shockwaves through the financial and political world. Arrests were made. Trials began. Names that had once seemed untouchable were now splashed across every newspaper and news broadcast. The network that had operated in shadows for decades was finally crumbling, exposed by the courage of a single mother who had refused to stay silent. Claire and Lily started a new life in a quiet town far from everything they had known. New names, new home, new beginning. Lily adjusted faster than Claire had expected, making friends at her new school and filling her room with drawings just like before. One evening, as Claire was tucking her into bed, Lily looked up at her with those bright, innocent eyes. "Mom, are we safe now?" Claire smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, sweetheart, we are safe. The bad people cannot hurt us anymore." Lily nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Claire watched her drift off to sleep, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. She had been through hell. She had faced monsters and survived, and she had come out the other side stronger, braver, and more certain than ever that she would do anything to protect this child. 1 year later, Claire received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a sunset over the mountains and a short note written in familiar handwriting. "Claire, I heard you and Lily are doing well. That makes me happier than you will ever know. I want you to know that I finally visited Sophie's grave last week. For the first time in 20 years, I was able to stand there without feeling like I had failed her. Because of you, I found peace. Thank you for giving an old man his daughter back, even if only in spirit. Live well, love deeply, and never forget that you are stronger than you know. Richard." Claire read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in a small box where she kept her most precious memories, and walked outside to watch the sun set. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, tired, invisible, just trying to survive. She thought about everything she had been through, everything she had lost, everything she had gained. And she realized that the story of her life was not about the darkness she had faced. It was about the light she had found on the other side. Her name was Claire Gray. She was not a hero. She was just a mother who loved her daughter, and that love had made her unstoppable. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.